going to get started with the weekly Campfire. It's where our Accelerate America comes together once a week to listen to a fellow member's story and get inspired. And today we have Kerry Doman. Kerry has launched and grown multiple successful businesses, including LittleGuide Detroit, the largest media resource for families throughout Metro Detroit. She created LittleGuide in 2018 after having 2 kids and realizing that there was a shortage of resources for parents in the Metro Detroit area. She searched to find a concise list of classes or events, or at least a list of ideas, and found nothing. Now, a robust resource of experiences and suggestions, LittleGuide helps families navigate life with children and helps parents and caregivers make the most of every day. Kerry admits that managing a growing media empire and a growing family of now 3 children isn't easy, but she truly loves the work and what she's doing. Listen in today as Kerry gives details on her entrepreneurial journey in today's weekly Campfire. Welcome, Kerry. Yay!
Thank you.
It's always like the weird part when there's no like applause you can hear, and I feel like I need to give the applause because everybody's in the chat right now saying hello.
Virtual applause.
Yes, I love it. I'm so glad. I feel like I try, right? So Kerry, media empire, how does that feel when you hear that?
I think it still sounds like, even when you said that, I was like, wow, that's weird. But it is true. I think that's part of becoming an entrepreneur, or growing, I should say, growing as an entrepreneur, of giving yourself the credit that you deserve. I think too often as an entrepreneur, I think that's just part of our DNA, is just to be on to the next and not really dwell on what you have created and what you have done. So to me, it sounds weird. And I'm like, oh, that's a bit much. But the reality is, when you look at these media empires and you look at other outlets, we have a website, we have an e-newsletter, we have a digital magazine. We do events, in-person events. We have social media. So, I mean, name the channel, and we have addressed it. And we are doing it, and with a small team. So, I think it's really proud of what we have built in a short amount of time. And most importantly, we've built this just like incredibly strong community of moms, families, caregivers, etc.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I feel like, what I love so much too is how LittleGuide has grown, and you as a mom had a problem, right? And you knew that surely there were other moms that had this frustration as well. And like you saw that, you were looking to solve this pain point for you, but you also knew that there were other, there was a big group out there that also needed this to be solved. So was that like, exciting or nerve-wracking, like as you were starting LittleGuide, as you pursued, this direction because you had other, media sites before. So how did you kind of feel about, really pivoting and going hard on LittleGuide?
LittleGuide was always really exciting to me, I feel, but to back up, I started my entrepreneurial endeavors with After 5 Detroit, which was a similar outlet, but it told young professionals where to go, what to do, where to eat, drink, basically experience the vibrant lifestyle that Detroit has to offer. And it had a time and a place, and it was amazing, and I grew up with it. And then in COVID, and the honest truth is, prior to COVID, I was like, dude, I'm not up past 10 o'clock, so I can't tell you where the hottest place is. So my lifestyle was changing rapidly. And, when COVID shut down everything that we covered, events, dining, drinking, etc. It was just a natural progression. It had been 10 years, maybe, I don't even know. But I had it had run its course. And in my life and just where Detroit is, I was doing it when there was nothing else in Detroit that was talking to that audience, that was trying to attract and retain that audience. And so for that, we got a lot of accolades. We got a lot of attention. It was the perfect time, perfect thing at the perfect time. And did it ever hit the success that LittleGuide has in the last couple of years? No. Did it really, it yes, in a way, in its small way, but now we're just at a different pace, a different, whereas we had 10,000 emails and thought that was great, we're almost at 70,000 emails with LittleGuide in just a couple of years. So,
right.
It just shows you the scale.
Sure.
At the time, after 5, it was great. And now with LittleGuide, you're like, oh. I feel like everything I did with After 5 led me to the place where I could hit the ground running and basically apply everything I had learned with After 5 and apply it in the best, extract the best lessons learned, extract the best contacts. That's something I'm sure we'll talk about, or we talked about in the interview, of you're not great at everything. And so finding those contacts that are great at the things that you're not. So I feel like just all of these nuggets along the way have led to LittleGuide just being a really exciting endeavor that, just has exploded. And, we're proud to be the largest resource for families. And that means a lot. Whether you have families or not, if you don't have families, you're like, oh, okay, cool.
It's still impressive as heck. If you don't have kids, you have fur babies or anything, right? You still need the info and places to go. And it's incredible.
But when you do have kids, they're just it's constant. Even if it's just a new playground, if you have kids that will probably resonate with you, right? Oh yeah, tell me where to go. It's easy. Get me out of my house.
Please tell me where to go. Get me out of here.
Run them around so that they take a nap.
Exactly. That's where it's at. All right. We have the first poll question from the collective, Kerry. We're going to circle back. Tell me, who were some of your early influences?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that the first person that comes to mind and will always come to my mind is my mom. She was a working woman, and not just a working woman. She was a top executive at Ford and was just a badass. And I always grew up. And of course, when you're younger, you have no clue what's going on. And it's fun to talk to her now and she'd be like, oh yeah, Bill Ford Jr. offered me this role and I passed it up. Just
wow.
You're like, oh, that means something to me now.
Right.
Back then you just are
she's just mom.
Young, and you understand she's working mom, and she worked hard, and so did my dad. So I think just seeing that was my norm. And so now with my kids, and she always said, and now I repeat it, she's like, I'm a better mom because I do work.
Right.
That's not for every woman. That's not for every mom. But it is, it was true for her, and it's certainly true for me. So I think I appreciate her making working hard and excelling at your career the norm in our household. So that would be my first and foremost.
I love that. Was there another one in there?
Oh man, I think that there have been mentors and there have been people that have certainly played incredible roles in my life. Just one we just got off on the side as kind of a byproduct of After 5. Even though After 5 no longer exists, we still run a program called the Virtual Intern Experience. Well, it used to be Detroit Intern Experience, but then COVID hit and we went virtual. Anyway, so a big supporter of that program is who I consider a mentor. Her name's Margaret Trimmer. She's she heads up corporate partnerships at Delta Dental of Michigan. And, last week she spoke at our program and she was speaking on the topic of mentorship. And I kind of dropped to her of I know she knows she's my mentor and we have that relationship, but I was like, I never told her why. And the why was really liberating I think it meant a lot to her, but also for me, my why and why I look up to her so much is because she was probably one of the first people in my careers to really value my work. And by that, I mean,
Wow.
like, she was like, here's a really sizable check for a sponsorship. And
Right.
and that means a lot where when people were like, oh, yeah, the sponsorship is this. And she's like, how about we do this? And we really blow it up,
Right.
but you're like, sometimes it
Whoa,
takes
whoa,
someone
whoa.
to see that, see your
Right.
potential and be like, no, you need to value yourself more. Because you offer
Right.
something no one else does. And it was such a pivotal point in my career. And I told her that in the presentation. I was like, I now have to look at myself through her lens of like, well, if she's paying me this, then someone else should pay me that too. Right. So it's like you just move. It's like getting a new job. Right. But as entrepreneurs, this is our job. This is our raise. But it's like when you learn that if you're switching jobs and let's say you made X at one job, well, if you're switching, you're likely going to make X plus, right? That's part of why most people switch. Well, it's the same thing within my business that is based a lot on sponsorship and advertising. Well, if she's valuing at this, well, then I should expect other people to value this. And so that it was a huge opportunity for me to reevaluate how I look at myself and value the work that we're doing. And sometimes you need someone else to do that for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's kind of like another great segue to the next question the collective would like to ask you, Kerry, and that is, what was your greatest fear when you were, LittleGuide isn't your first business, but it sounds, like with any entrepreneur that maybe imposter syndrome, maybe that self-doubt, was that one of your great fears, or what were some of those fears as you were getting started that you worked through?
Yeah, I think the fears are, ironically, we had a second conversation last week. I learned so much from my own programs. It's amazing.
I love that.
We had an entrepreneur on because, with the intern program, we talk a lot with college students, and they're all so fascinated with entrepreneurship. And we're like, don't do it. It seems greener. The grass definitely seems greener, but it's not.
So funny. I just heard that with another entrepreneur yesterday. He's like, I always encourage people to not be an entrepreneur. I'm like, tell me why. He's going to be a Campfire guest coming up too. And I'm like, we need your insight, and you need to know all the sides. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I asked my good friend to join me because I told him, and he's a cat lover. So it's like, you've had 9 lives in the entrepreneurial sector, if you will.
Sure.
And I just knew he'd be very real about it. And we in fact did have a very real conversation for these students. And one of the things that we were talking about is the mental health portion of this.
Sure.
And I think that goes with fear. So whether you label it fear or just overall mental health, it's very hard. And I touched on it before of being straight on to the next. You work so hard to land these contracts. And then literally 0.2 seconds after it's signed, you're like, okay, on to the next. And it's so mentally draining. And that's something that he brought up. And I just thought it was such an important component that I've never really talked about, but that should be talked about, because I have to believe that you'd be hard pressed to find an entrepreneur that hasn't dealt with that mental stress, mental health of just when is it good enough? When do you hit the top? When can you allow yourself to be happy or proud? So I think that's it's not necessarily a fear, but it's something that it weighs on you like a fear. So of course there's always fear of failure. I use that as a driver. Maybe that's a mental health issue too. But there's always a healthy dose of a fear of failure. That, and I think that with After 5, I now talk about it openly and freely, but for a while I was done with After 5 for many years. And, And I just was like, oh, I didn't want it to hit cranes that it closed or whatever. And so with COVID, I was like, this is amazing. I'm just going to label
Perfect
this
segue to closing this.
Air quote, I'm like, this After 5 was a casualty of COVID. And that's what I'm saying. And it was like literally this godsend that I was like, okay, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to answer to anything. Like, there's nothing to report on after 5. And and it, thank goodness for me, a lot of people had casualties of COVID. In business wise, also, personally, that we won't get into that. Like, I just mean business wise, that were devastating, right? And and for me, it was just like this opportunity to shed this dead weight. For me to then full on go in on LittleGuide. So, so for me, it was a positive. For others, my heart breaks that so many companies had to close and had really hard times. But I'll forever be grateful that was like, cool, now we can move forward.
Sure. But, I also feel like you saw that opportunity and were in a position and ready to go all in on it. Like, you could have just, kept it going. So I feel like that really also speaks to you as a business owner and entrepreneur as well, that you were like, okay, this is the decision, time to go all in. And like, to see even so from there is like, families need this more than ever because their kids aren't at school and they're looking to get out and they have to be outside, right? Because what else are you going to do? So I think, that makes total sense. Of course, like you said, it's heartbreaking in so endless ways, but it speaks to how smart and savvy you are to be able to, put the foot on the gas with LittleGuide and to have that at the ready, that, with your new interests, and to be able to take that to where it's at today and to continue to grow it even moving forward. So I think that's, really fantastic. And so the next question from the collective, if you got one do-over, what would it be, Kerry?
Oh, man. See, these are the rapid fire questions. I'm not great. One do-over. I'm not a do-over or regret kind of person. But there are, now that, like, I also suppress things and try to forget it. It's a blessing and a curse as part of my, my personality is that I really just push those things down and try to forget about them. I won't dive into them, but you make some really dumb decisions. I was young. And naive, which worked in my favor in a lot of senses, and it didn't work in my favor in other senses. I mean, one huge mistake that thankfully I was able to get out of, but when I first started after 5, I got really excited and got this lease, and it was this live space downtown Detroit. And again, far before it was cool to live downtown. And so it's just like this tight knit community. And fortunately, the building owners were 2 entrepreneurs, like the coolest guys in the world. And at some point I was like, listen, I bit off too much that I couldn't handle. Like, I can't do this. I don't even remember how long it was, but I had to back out. It was a bad decision financially.
How old were you, Kerry? How old were you when this was?
Such a baby. I probably was 22, 23.
Oh my gosh. 100. Yeah. Baby. Oh my goodness.
Baby. And, thank goodness I had created such a strong relationship with them, but that they were also entrepreneurs and that they were just like, yeah, cool. We will take care of this. Like they could have put me under before I even really started. But they got it. Right. And I think that's that camaraderie with entrepreneurs, that, if you treat others right, hopefully they'll give you that grace of like, yeah. Cool. Well, try not to do that again.
Right. That is so kind. And Alyssa just said, you're so brave. That was exciting and terrifying, right? Like, of course, that's what you're going to do, right? And then I feel like it's also brave and terrifying to admit that mistake, right? And own those things. And like, they probably respected that so much from you too, where they could be like, oh, she's not paying us rent, or she can't make this happen, and you could have ghosted them, right? Because you're 22, and it's kind of like could be understandable in that way, but you showed up, and so it's just, on all sides, I think a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have done that. I would have never screwed them over like that. But yes, they, I think before it got too far, like I could see the writing on the wall. So before,
Right.
I missed anything, it was like, hey, this is going to happen and I don't want it to. And to this
Right.
day, like, again, Detroit's such a small, big city that to this day, I
Right.
see them all the time and just like adore them, just
Sure.
absolutely adore them, and will never ever forget the grace that they showed me.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. Yes, Alyssa says going to them with this fault loss gave you so many skills and experience for the future. So 100%. I love that. All right. So we're wrapping up the weekly campfire here with Kerry Doman of LittleGuide Detroit. And our final question from the collective, Kerry, is what is the biggest change in you?
There's a lot. I think I'm continuing to change and trying to continue to change, right? And a lot goes back to my kids. And even last night I was faced with a challenge with them. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Who knows what I'm doing? Who knows what they're doing with their oldest, their firstborn, their 5-year-old? I'm like, I don't know the answer to this. I know there's a problem. I don't know the answer to it. Don't really want to, read a 500-page book on this. Someone just give me the cliff notes of how to deal with this 5-year-old. But, I'm trying to change for the better of just also, I think the biggest change that and I touched on it before, was that mental health component. And like I said, I was so happy that Mike brought it up because, I don't talk about it much, and I don't really give myself that much time to dwell on it or delve into it. But it is something that I'm constantly not, I would just, it would be overcome. It would just take over my life and just this fear of who knows, I mean, failure, but everything else added to the list. And just not having so much of my mental health tied to my business.
Sure.
I think that's what I'm.
Very important. Definitely. I mean, and that's true. Like you have your family, right? Anybody, right? Their business is your life, but it isn't the whole of your life. And so I think that that's really profound and something that many business owners forget. And I do think, as we have been moving forward in the world and progressing, that we're starting to realize that, right? Remember, hustle culture was such a thing a few years ago. And then it was the shift, wait, that is terribly unhealthy. Yes, you have to work hard and put all of yourself into your business, but you can't let yourself go off the deep end with it, because it's a losing game.
Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard not to tie yourself up and tie your happiness or your sanity up into the things that you do every day, and pour your heart, soul, money, time into. So it's an ongoing effort. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Of course. I love that. All right, Kerry. So as we wrap up here, tell us what is next for LittleGuide Detroit.
Ooh, we have some exciting things coming up. I have been sitting on some ideas from day one. It's just really executing now. I really, right now and always, we are a free website and available for anyone to use. But I think that there's an opportunity. My little teaser will be I think there's an opportunity to add a secondary component or a level up with maybe a membership model. So we are working on some new ways and platforms in which we can execute on that idea. But, it's just as with anything, we're building it out and we are building up to it. You have to have a strong base. You have to have a strong community to then be like, hey, will you pay $5 a month for this, $10 a month for added content or added bonuses? And have the play an integral part in their lives where they're like, yeah, absolutely. Right. So we're building up to it, but I think we're getting close. And that is my personal goal, is to just see how we can expand the empire. We'll bring it full circle.
Build it out.
How can we build that up?
The empire for good, the empire for families. I love that, Kerry. I can't wait to see what you do with LittleGuide Detroit. We will all be waiting. Please share any teasers with the collective. We are here for you however you need, and we appreciate you joining us today for this weekly campfire. Any final words, advice, tips, anything to leave us with before we wrap up?
Oh, man. Just have fun. Don't take it too seriously. Have fun, take care of yourself, and enjoy the summer. I miss a lot of the summer with my programs. It's a busy time with everything, but enjoy the summer, and thank you for having me and tuning in.
Of course. Thank you so much, Kerry. We appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be back next week with another weekly campfire. Thank you, Kerry. Have a fantastic day and a great summer.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
If you'd like to join the Accelerate Collective and attend future campfires, visit accelerateamerica.com/join and check out our future guests at accelerateamerica.com/campfire. Take care.